Now, with this year somehow being the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith's release, I figured we should do some videos about that movie, maybe even kind of a whole series of videos about it. It is, after all, a fantastic film, in my opinion, and in the opinion of some, it is the best Star Wars movie of all time, and I definitely think it deserves the praise and delivered the goods when answering the question we were all wondering going into the prequels in the first place. That being, just how does Anakin Skywalker ultimately fall to the dark side and become Darth Vader? And though I do think the prequel films overall do a great job answering that question, all on their own, they weren't the only piece of media or place that explored that back in the day. And so in this video, again, the first in what I hope to be a series about Episode 3, I want to go back to before Revenge of the Sith even came out in May of 2005. And to take a look at something that not only helped bridge the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, but actually I think did one of the coolest things Star Wars has ever done. In this video I want to go back to the animated Clone Wars micro series, or the Tartakovsky Clone Wars as some call it, though more specifically I want to talk mainly about the third season of it that aired in March of 2005, roughly 2 months before Revenge of the Sith hit theaters. Though before that I do have to mention just how unique and cool the first 2 seasons, or the first volume of the show had been, and that it had done a fantastic job of giving us a bit of a story set between episodes 2 and 3, first premiering on Cartoon Network with 10 of these roughly 3-minute long episodes in November of 2003, before getting 10 more episodes about a half year later. And in the series we got some cool sort of one-off stories about the clones and some of the Jedi, as well as seeing a character like Dirge on screen and seeing some of Ventress's training with Dooku, as well as a sort of main story featuring Obi-Wan and Anakin, and one that even sort of shows how their relationship begins to grow and begins to change from master and apprentice in Attack of the Clones to brothers in Revenge of the Sith. And it's a story that culminates in an encounter with Asajj Ventress, though actually the final episode of the first 2 seasons of the first volume was an on-screen introduction to the terrifying General Grievous. And yes, he was actually quite terrifying in that episode. He was like something out of a horror movie even, and was maybe a bit different from how he was presented later on in the other Clone Wars animated series. Either way, the first 2 seasons gave us some stories about what happened during the war, stories that the movies just did not have time for, and they did it in a very unique and stylized way that just kind of worked for Star Wars, in my opinion. I think the animation style was fantastic, and the stories were interesting. And though no, it wasn't the only place to find such stories, or the only piece of media filling in the gap between episodes 2 and 3, I was a huge fan of the first 2 seasons of Clone Wars at the time, and was very much looking forward to the final season of it, which again was going to come out just a few months before Revenge of the Sith did. And that season ended up being similar to the previous ones in terms of animation style and all that, but also a bit different in other ways. It had longer episodes, they were now over 10 minutes instead of just 3 minutes, and it maybe felt a bit more focused on telling one story instead of, again, kind of having these sort of one-off episodes mixed in with everything else. Though what made it sort of special or truly unique, though I did not know it at the time or when it first aired or when I was initially watching it, but it was literally going to lead directly into Revenge of the Sith, so much so that the last shot of the series is essentially the opening shot, or could be placed right alongside the opening shot of the movie, as we see the Battle of Coruscant raging on. In fact, the last few episodes of that final season of Clone Wars is more than just a generic sort of prequel to the film that has little or no bearing on anything, but rather it shows the events that lead, again, directly into the movie, including the beginning of the battle and how Palpatine is ultimately captured by Grievous, and how he escapes the Jedi and what he does to some of the Jedi. We even learn why Grievous has a cough like he does in the movie, which is because, as he was escaping with Palpatine, he had his chest compartment crushed by Mace Windu. We also see what Obi-Wan and Anakin were up to right before they arrive at the battle, or their last sort of mission that they were on, which ironically was them looking for General Grievous. And I will never forget the first time I saw Revenge of the Sith in the theater at midnight on release day, and reading the opening crawl, and it gets to the part where it said, "In a stunning move, the fiendish droid leader General Grievous has swept into the Republic capital and kidnapped Chancellor Palpatine, leader of the Galactic Senate. And I still remember thinking to myself in that moment, wait a second, they're talking about what happened in Clone Wars. Is this picking up right from that? And then we see Anakin and Obi-Wan show up and join the battle, again just as it looked, or more or less how it looked in Clone Wars. Obviously the movie is different from the animated show, but it is clearly meant to be the exact same thing. And sure enough, this was a continuation of that show, right down to General Grievous having a cough, which if you just watch the film and don't know that Grievous isn't just some kind of droid, it would probably be a bit odd or confusing even. But anyway, realizing what that final season of Clone Wars had been, that it led right into the film, was just one of the coolest things ever to me. I remember, as silly as it may sound now, feeling like I was in some sort of a special or secret club, because I knew not everyone in that theater, not most people if we're being honest, had seen Clone Wars and knew the full context here. It felt like I had been rewarded for watching the show and being this diehard fan, that I had gotten to watch the events of the opening crawl before the movie came out. And though, no, in all reality, if you hadn't seen Clone Wars, like again the vast majority of people there, or just in general who saw the film, it's not like you were truly missing anything. It's not like the movie didn't make sense if you hadn't watched it or you were lost and couldn't figure out what the heck was going on now. The opening crawl, as usual, did a fine job of letting you know what was up, and in all reality, knowing exactly how Palpatine was kidnapped or why Grievous had a cough, that wasn't about to make the movie technically better somehow. It was just cool that they had done something like this. It was very much appreciated by me. It made the Star Wars galaxy, I don't know, feel bigger or more real somehow in that moment. I don't really know how to explain it, but it was just so cool to me. And yes, I know the book that technically came out even before Clone Wars did, that being A Labyrinth of Evil, also told a story that led right into the film. The same story yet different from the one Clone Wars did. But I actually hadn't read that book yet. I didn't read it for the first time until it hit paperback later that year. And quite honestly, not to shift gears too much here, but one of the things that made me a little sort of sad about the sequel trilogy, besides what it turned out to be, was the lack of anything like this. I remember before The Force Awakens came out, they made a big deal out of the journey to The Force Awakens. They put it on a couple different books and other things, including the Aftermath novel, and made me think that we might just be getting something like this yet again. We might get this direct connection to the movie because, of course, Disney, or Lucasfilm under them, of course they were going to have this huge, elaborate plan for the new trilogy, and that those who kept up with everything, just like me, we might again be rewarded somehow, or be able to weave all the threads together and glimpse or get a tease of where things were ultimately going with the trilogy if we kept up with everything. Which, of course, was not the case at all. The sequels, as we know, were kind of a mess that had little or no planning. But I have to admit, the belief that they would do something like that is what got me into watching theory videos after The Force Awakens, and what ultimately started me making my own theory videos, which has led me here now. So, at least there's that. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. I thought I'd just share this fun little story or a little trip down memory lane, and I'm wondering if anybody else had a similar experience watching Episode 3 for the first time after watching Clone Wars or reading Labyrinth of Evil. Whatever the case may be, though, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Revenge of the Sith and some other Star Wars as well. And until next time, thanks for watching.